There's a huge problem with disparities in asylum approval rates in different places in the United States. It's really unfair, and it's no exaggeration to say that for some people, the question of where your asylum case is heard may really be an issue of life or death importance. In this video, I'm going to show you where in the United States asylum cases are more and less likely to be approved, and I'm going to tell you what you can do if you want to have your case heard in a place with a high approval rate. I'm Brian Manning, and I used to be an asylum officer with the government, but now as an asylum lawyer, I help immigrants all over the country to secure their future in America through asylum. Now, when I saw recent statistics from the entity that manages the immigration courts called EOIR, it made me think of a line from a song by U2, which is my favorite band. You know, the Irish rock band led by Bono. Well, in one of their songs, Bono sings, "Where you live should not decide whether you live or whether you die." I thought about this because that is what's at stake for some asylum seekers. Their asylum decision may literally have life or death consequences. And the difference in approval rates for asylum cases is so drastic among geographic regions in the United States that it's almost like where you live really could determine your fate. And this is, of course, because where you live determines the asylum office or immigration court that has jurisdiction over your case. If the court or asylum office hearing your case has a high approval rate, well, that's great. But if they're inclined to deny people, well, then that's a problem. Now, I want to show you some recent statistics on immigration court asylum approval rates. Now, these do track, for the most part, with approval rates for the asylum offices at USCIS, with one notable exception. While the New York immigration courts have high approval rates, the New York Asylum Office has, of late, had a very low approval rate. But apart from that, it's safe to assume that the approval rate of an asylum office will probably be in line with the rate of the courts in the same region, but with immigration courts having slightly higher approval rates than the asylum offices, at least recently. Okay, here's the data from the last few months of 2022. We see all the immigration courts listed with their asylum approval rates, right? Now, on the left are the courts with the lowest approval rates, with the rate increasing or going up as we move to the right. I want to focus in on a few of them, a few of the larger courts that hear a high volume of asylum caseloads, and you'll see a pattern start to emerge. On the right, which are the courts with higher approval rates, we've got Imperial, California at an almost 70% approval rate, followed by, well, Sacramento, California, around 65%. A couple of spots over, we see San Francisco, California, in at just below 60% approval rate. Now, are you seeing a pattern? 3 of the 4 highest approval rates are in the state of California. A little further along, we see other big cities with pretty high approval rates. We've got Chicago at about 35%, and then New York City at just below 30%. So these are some of the higher approval rates, right? Now, what about the lowest approval rates? Where is it hardest to win asylum? Among courts that actually have a sizable asylum caseload, the court in Omaha, Nebraska is about as tough as it gets, coming in at perhaps a 1% asylum approval rate. And then we've got a court in Atlanta, then one in Florida, both at around 2% approval. Those are followed by 3 different Texas courts in a row, ranging from a 3 to 5% approval rate. In fact, there are actually 3 courts in Houston that have approval rates under 6%. That's really, really low. And there are several other Texas courts, in addition to those in Houston, clustered on this left end of the spectrum with approval rates under 10%. This means that Texas is perhaps the toughest state in which to win asylum. Now, this marks a shift. Over the last few years, Atlanta and Charlotte, North Carolina, had the distinction of being known as the hardest places to win, but it looks like that title has been passed to Texas, and more specifically, Houston. By the way, if you want to maximize your chances for asylum success, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss the insights that I share on this channel. All right, you may be wondering who's in the middle. Well, the mean asylum approval rate in immigration court is 17%, and the court that hits that mark is Santa Ana, California. A few other courts around the middle of the pack include those in Denver, Colorado, Newark, New Jersey, and Orlando, Florida. Now let's take just a minute to appreciate how big the difference is at the extremes in 2 of the country's larger immigration courts. An asylum seeker in Sacramento, California has a 65% chance of success, while someone in Houston has just a 5% chance. That's a massive difference. It should not be this way. The asylum law is the same throughout the entire country, so there should not be a difference this big in approval rates from one place to another. It's true that there's some variation in how the law gets interpreted in different regions because of court rulings. And it's also true that the immigrant populations that tend to live in a given area can be more or less likely to have viable asylum claims depending on the main problems facing their country. But I don't think those things are sufficient to explain the yawning gap that we see in approval rates among the courts. Whatever the reason for these differences may be, the result is the same. You are much more likely to win asylum in some places than others. So what are we to do with that reality? What does it mean for asylum seekers? Should you try to have your case heard in a place where approval rates are high? Honestly, yes. If I were seeking asylum, I would probably try to get my case heard by one of the immigration courts or asylum offices with high approval rates. Now, it's not as simple as just selecting where you want to have your case. It goes by where you live. In the context of affirmative asylum cases being adjudicated by USCIS, your case will automatically be transferred to the asylum office with jurisdiction over your new address if you move. With the immigration court, it's not so straightforward. If you move, you have to ask the judge to transfer the case to the court that handles cases where you now live. And usually this kind of request is approved, but not always. There are a lot of considerations that go into deciding where you will live and whether you're willing to move so as to try to have your case considered in a favorable setting. Things like the cost of living, job availability, and perhaps having family or other support systems in a given place all come into the mix. But all things being equal, or if you are simply committed to giving yourself the best possible chance to win asylum, then yes, I do think it bears thinking long and hard about going to a place where your case may be considered by a court or asylum office with a high approval rate. If you're ready to take the next step and get individualized help with your asylum case, then call my office today. The number is 713-909-0401. And remember, we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you are. Call us now to schedule an asylum strategy session so we can help you secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's an honor to serve you in your asylum journey.